and I had planned on spending this day shopping in Atlanta with my cousin Lucille. She and I were going to look for outfits to wear to Founders Day in a few weeks, a celebration that had been going on in Parsons, Georgia, since before Granny was born. Everybody young and old, colored and white, wanted to be at Founders Day, dressed in their best outfits. Yet here I was, cooking and cleaning at Miss Peggy's house, instead of gazing at dresses made of tulle, taffeta, and silk. I wasn't planning on buying one of those off-the-rack dresses, since I was pretty handy with the needle and the thread. I planned on making the dress that I liked and saving some money. I asked for the day off weeks before, and Granny and Miss Peggy had said yes. But when Miss Peggy told me Jimmy Earl was coming home on the same day as my trip to Atlanta, I knew I had to stay and help her and Granny get ready. Both of them were too old to try to cook and clean in all this heat. I was sad that I had to give up my trip to Atlanta, but I would have just spent the day worrying about Granny and Miss Peggy. Jimmy Earl was coming home from the University of Georgia to visit for the summer, and Miss Peggy wanted all his favorite foods waiting on the dinner table when he walked inside the door. Ordinarily, on hot days like this, we didn't even cook. I'd make some sandwiches or a tray of vegetables or fruit, and that would be about all. But Miss Peggy was bound and determined that Jimmy Earl get the king's treatment when he returned from school. I leaned against the counter. I was so hot I could hardly breathe. The windows were all open, and I had a little fan sitting on the windowsill that wasn't doing much more than circulating hot air. I filled up my mason jar with some of the spring water I'd stopped for that morning. Miss Peggy had indoor water and a Frigidaire she kept it cool in, but water straight from the faucet just didn't taste the same to me, even though the water came from the well my grandfather had dug for Miss Peggy and her husband when they first built this house. I mopped the sweat from my face with the dish towel on the counter and looked around the kitchen. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't filled up with a pot or pan or serving tray of Jimmy Earl's favorite foods. The menu for his homecoming consisted of baked ham, short ribs, fried chicken with gravy, dressing, collard greens, stewed okra and tomatoes, potato salad, apple dumplings, buttermilk biscuits, and German chocolate cake. Most everything was already done, except for a few things like the biscuits and the gravy that I planned on making right around the time Jimmy Earl arrived. It was 4:30, and Jimmy Earl was sure to be home any minute. Miss Peggy tried to help me earlier after Granny had to go home on account of her gout acting up. But Miss Peggy was getting feeble her own self, so it was up to me to make sure Jimmy Earl's homecoming dinner was everything his gran wanted it to be. "Opal, I swear you done got to be as good of a cook as your Grandma Birdie," Miss Peggy said as she walked into the kitchen, taking slow, measured steps. Miss Peggy used to be a big woman like my granny, but she'd lost a whole lot of weight over the last few months. And on top of that, her movements were getting slower. A sign of age, she had said. I'd wondered if that was really the case, but I didn't dare ask. Even at the age of nearly being an adult, I still understood my place when it came to Granny and Miss Peggy. Some things they just wouldn't discuss with me, and their health was generally something they only talked about with each other in hushed tones. Miss Peggy made her way over to the stove where the pot of greens was still cooking. She stuck the big metal spoon into the pot and dipped out some of the pot liquor. She blew on it and then took a sip. I watched her as she closed her eyes and moaned, "Lord, child, this pot liquor is better than any I've ever cooked. You're gonna make some lucky man a good wife someday." "I'm not looking for no husband," I muttered. But even when I said the words, I knew I wasn't exactly being honest. I was almost 18. No, I didn't necessarily have a boy in mind to marry since Granny wouldn't even let me keep company with the boy yet. But I did wonder who might be the boy I would someday marry and start a family with. "Every girl is looking for a husband, honey. Some just look harder than others. But never mind all that.